For the past 2 weeks, I've had the Nothing Phone 4a Pro in the studio, and instead of doing a traditional review, I wanted to do something a bit different and compare it to what I think a lot of people will naturally be comparing it to, the Pixel 10a, and for good reason. Both of these phones start at the same exact price, $499 US, but have two wildly, completely different takes on Android. The Pixel 10a is very prim, proper, minimalist, and a little bit playful at times with some of these brighter, newer colors, while the Nothing Phone 4a Pro seems a bit more aggressive, cool, and genuinely interesting in other aspects, which you can tell throughout every single part of these two devices. Look at the design, for example. The Pixel 10a in isolation looks great, especially for a Pixel. It follows a lot of industry trends like flat side rails, a boxy shape, minimalist details like a completely clean backside with no camera bump at all, and some fun, bright color options. We also have Gorilla Glass 7i on the front and a matte plastic back, which always feels nice to hold day over day, and it's a nice phone, all things considered. But this, the Nothing Phone 4a Pro, I really like this, and personally, I prefer it. If you're someone like me and you appreciate smartphone design, the Nothing Phone 4a Pro has all the finesse you could possibly want. The camera module is an incredibly unique showstopper. It's a small, transparent window that shows off the internal components, little bumps, screws, an LED recorder light that flashes when you're actively filming video, and the recently very iconic Glyph Matrix display on the back that can show you the time, timers, and notifications, alongside the ability to download third-party add-ons for it, which is always a huge win if you like to tinker around with your device. For the rest of the device, we also have Gorilla Glass 7i on the front, but even better, a full metal unibody build. And I haven't seen one of these in quite some time, like since the HTC days, which is a huge compliment. The phone feels solid, well built, and has a few pieces of character that set it apart from other unibody builds. Unfortunately, that does mean that there's no wireless charging here, which is only something you can decide is important, but for all the finesse packed into this design, plus 50-watt wire charging, it's not something that I'm too worried about. To me, it's a worthy trade-off for something this unique, especially at this price point. Touching on the displays real quick, I'd say both are really good, but if I had to pick one, I would say the Pixel 10a is ever so slightly better. It's consistently brighter, sharper, and has better color in my opinion. From everything I can tell, it's basically the Pixel 10 flagship display, but on a more affordable device, which is great. The reason why I say consistently brighter is because the Pixel 10a hits 3000 nits peak and 2000 nits in regular use, while the Nothing Phone 4a Pro hits 5000 nits peak, which is great, but only 1600 nits in regular use. So on average, the Pixel 10a will be brighter in most regular use case scenarios. You do though get a bigger screen on the 4a Pro, 6.8 inches versus 6.3 on the Pixel 10a, and thinner bezels on the Nothing Phone as well, which I will always commend them for. Based on my time using both phones, the difference in display quality is largely negligible at best. The more important factor here is the bigger screen on the 4a Pro. It just gives you a lot more to work with. It's about 20% larger than the Pixel 10a, which goes a long way when you're watching videos, typing, gaming, or doing multitasking of some kind. The Pixel 10a, on the other hand, though, is much more compact, much more pocketable, and is a lot more manageable for one-handed use, which in general makes the decision of which one is better really more of a personal preference. Software, though, is where things do get a little weird. Google, without a doubt, I think wins on paper, but the Nothing Phone actually has a lot more to appreciate and enjoy. To be clear, both are super clean, super minimal software experiences. There's no bloat, there's no mess, there's no duplicate apps, but they're still two wildly different takes on what clean Android should look and feel like. With the Pixel 10a, you already know you're getting all of the classic Pixel staples. At a glance, call screening, quick share with iOS devices, scam detection, satellite SOS, 7 long years of software support, plus access to whatever happens to land in future Pixel feature drops. Typically, the Pixel has practical features that serve the average person in their normal everyday life without them having to think about it. Nothing, on the other hand, has a completely different take. They offer features that require a bit more manual effort but are largely more engaging. Things like the ability to add third-party icon packs, a depth effect wallpapers, Nothing Playground for AI-generated widgets, a smart app drawer option similar to what we see on iOS, which I actually do like a lot, 4x4 quick settings tiles alongside that classic Nothing aesthetic, the monochrome-themed operating system, the dot matrix font, all of the weird head-turning notification sounds, and of course, glyph toys for the dot matrix display. And on top of that, Nothing has a Essential Space, which is basically a one-stop digital hub to store screenshots, reminders, and record meetings or conversations. Basically, it's Google Keep, Pixel Recorder, and Google Tasks all wrapped up into one singular app. It recently got a full UI overhaul, which makes it more organized and easier to manage. The dedicated Essential key was moved from the right-hand side to the left-hand side to prevent accidental presses. And according to a recent blog post, Essential Space supports cloud access for seamless cross-platform use across phones, desktops, laptops, and watches. There isn't a web portal available just yet at the time of this recording, but from what I'm understanding reading this blog post, it is coming at some point eventually. So for one, credit to Nothing for actually listening to its community and making motion happen in that regard. I really do appreciate it. And when it comes to which is better, Pixel UI versus Nothing UI, again, it comes down to personal preference. Do you see yourself using these super intentional features that are built into Nothing OS, or do you just want the turn it on and forget about it type of experience that Pixel UI has to offer? Then we can talk about performance, and on paper, we have the Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 on the Nothing Phone 4a Pro versus the Tensor G4 in the Pixel 10a, and honestly, using these two mid-range phones side by side for a few weeks now, you really honestly can't go wrong with either. Objectively, in benchmarks, the Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 is going to outperform the Tensor G4, so if that matters to you, go with the Nothing Phone. But in practical daily use, I think it's a complete wash. Both phones are buttery smooth, whether you're zipping through the operating system, taking photos, or scrolling through social media. To me, the experience is near identical. Gaming is relatively the same story. Neither the Snapdragon 7 or the Tensor G4 are designed to push max settings at high frame rates, so if heavy 3D gaming is your thing, you're not going to hit 120 frames at max resolution on either of these devices. At this $499 price point, I just wouldn't expect it. You'll probably be getting somewhere around 10 to 20% better gaming performance on the Snapdragon chip if I had to put a number on it, but it's not really a drastic difference by any means. By extension, battery life tells the same story, but in a positive light, I will say. Both have almost identical battery sizes, 5,080 milliamp hours on the Nothing Phone versus 5,100 on the Pixel 10a, and both deliver approximately 6 to 8 hours of on-screen time on average. Both are easily 2-day phones for lighter users, and again, you really can't go wrong with either of them. The only thing that really matters is how you end up topping them up. The Nothing Phone charges faster at 50 watts versus 30 watts on the Pixel 10a, but the Pixel 10a does have wireless charging while the Nothing Phone does not. Again, all of that is personal preference. Lastly, I wanted to close out this comparison with the camera system, and I would say for me, this is the hardest area to call because both systems are genuinely great, but they each have their own pros and cons that don't make it an absolute slam dunk in either way. In regular daytime shooting, it really doesn't matter which one you go with. In broad daylight, both phones take bright, vibrant, social media ready images with a lot of natural depth and a ton of detail. If we look incredibly hard, we could find some minor differences between the two, but honestly, we are splitting hairs on which one is actually better in that scenario. Where the Nothing Phone truly separates itself is with zoomed images. Images on the 50 megapixel OIS periscope lens on the Nothing Phone are genuinely awesome. If you compare it to the Pixel 10a's maximum zoom at 8x versus the Nothing Phone 4a Pro also at 8x, to me, it's a night and day difference in terms of clarity. Zoomed images on the Pixel 10a by comparison often look sloppy, fuzzy, and they're hard to read, while on the Nothing Phone 4a Pro, they're crisp, clear, and full of detail, although they could be a bit brighter. Maybe some of that computational photography needs to be tuned there. And yes, the Pixel 10a maxes out at 8x digital zoom, while the Nothing Phone 4a Pro goes all the way up to 140 zoom. That's over 100 times more reach than what the Pixel 10a is ever capable of. Whether that results in a practically useful image is up to you, but it's an awesome advantage nonetheless. Nighttime images are a completely different story though. The Pixel 10a pulls in significantly more detail in every single situation. Shadows are lifted, textures are way more visible, and the night sky gets so bright it often looks like overcast daytime shots at times, which is fine, but sometimes night photos on the Pixel 10a also look bleachy, washed out, and the lens flare is genuinely awful, and yes, I did clean the camera lenses before taking these shots. The Nothing Phone 4a Pro does a way better job controlling those nighttime blooms and giving you a much more realistic interpretation of shadows. They're true blacks, the way you actually saw them in real life. The night sky actually looks looks dark the way you saw it in real life. But once you start to add any motion into the mix, like a burning flame, rain falling, a flowing creek, you get this ugly motion blur that's really hard to ignore, and that's where the Pixel 10a starts to feel way more reliable. As you can see, there's real pros and cons to both devices, and there isn't a clear-cut winner no matter how you look at it. In a lot of ways, I think the conversation comes down to who is actually buying this phone. Who needs an accessible Pixel device versus one that's genuinely more interesting, and we see that contrast pretty often whenever Pixel gets compared to something else. The Pixel 10a has a lot packed in it. It's the type of phone anyone can pick up and use without any friction, and Pixels do tend to go on sale, so there's a very, very good chance you will not ever pay full price. Nothing, on the other hand, fits its specific archetype. It's cool, and it's for people who want something actually different, and honestly, for a device this interesting, it's surprising just how competitive it is against someone as big as Google that has had so many years developing their A series all this time. With that said, I want to hear from the Android community on this one. Which one of these two would you go with if you had the choice? And please be specific and tell me in the comments. I think this could be a fun discussion for people to keep coming back to in the future. That said, my friends, until next time, this has been Jordan Floyd from 9 to 5 Google. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.